The camera glides slowly across a ballroom soaked in warm golden light. Crystal chandeliers sway ever so slightly, their prisms scattering fragments of light across the polished marble floor. The air, moments ago filled with the gentle hum of a string quartet, now trembles with the raw electric shock of panic. Somewhere in that chaos, the sharp crack of a gunshot still lingers in the ears. The sound feels like it's bouncing off the high, ornate ceilings, sinking deep into the chest of every guest present. Samantha stands near the center of it all. Her navy evening gown, once pristine, is torn along the sleeve. A streak of blood runs in a thin, glistening line from her upper arm to her fingertips, staining the fabric like a ribbon of scarlet. Her breathing is steady, almost unnaturally so, as if her body knows there's no time to feel the pain. Around her, chairs lie overturned. Silver trays have been dropped, their contents spilling in random arcs across the floor. Champagne glasses shatter under the hurried steps of fleeing guests. The fragrance of expensive perfume mixes with the acrid metallic scent of fear. In the far corner of the room, a man in a custom-tailored tuxedo, her father, stands frozen, his hand gripping the back of a chair as though it's the only thing keeping him upright. For years, he's spoken of Samantha with a faint grimace, introducing her as just a security guard. Now that same daughter stands between him and a man with a gun. Her eyes are locked, not on her father, but on the threat just beyond him. Her shoulders square. Her stance widens. Every muscle seems to hum with the instinct to move, to act. She's a soldier again, though nobody in this room except her truly understands what that means. The chaos blurs. The screaming fades into the background, replaced by a single heavy beat of silence in the viewer's mind. And then the narrator's voice slices clean through it. What would make a father who spent his entire life belittling his daughter hold his breath as she saves his life? The scene cuts sharply, like the snap of a camera shutter, yanking us away from the chaos of the wedding hall. We're suddenly in a series of moments from Samantha's past, each one framed in the soft, muted colors of memory, except the words are sharp, cutting through like glass. A garden party in spring. Samantha stands beside her father as he chats with his business associates, champagne in hand. He gestures toward her with a polite smile. "This is my daughter Samantha. She's just a security guard." The words hang in the air, casual to him, crushing to her. A polite nod from the guests, and the conversation moves on without her. Cut to a formal dinner at a private club. The clink of silverware, the low hum of powerful voices. Her father leans toward a couple in evening wear. "Yes, my daughter chose a different path. Security work, you know. Not everyone wants a real career." She forces a faint smile, swallowing the sting in her chest. Another scene, a charity gala. Flashbulbs pop, laughter swells. She's in a simple black dress, standing near the edge of the crowd. Her father, in the center, introduces her to a board member. Meet Samantha. She's not in finance like the rest of us. She works in security. A small shrug. A look that says, "What can you do?" Each time Samantha's eyes flicker with something unspoken. The hurt is real, but so is her control. She stands straight, her hands steady, her voice calm whenever she replies. She never lets them see the crack in her armor. But inside those words echo like a slow drip against stone, wearing away at something deep within her. The flashbacks fade, each memory dissolving into shadow, leaving only the weight of those words, just a security guard. Then black screen. A slow, deliberate inhale. The narrator's voice returns low and certain, each word cutting through like a promise. But in just a few hours, every single person in that room will know exactly who she really is. A faint sound begins to rise in the background, footsteps, quickening, the distant murmur of a crowd, and somewhere the sharp metallic click of a weapon being loaded. Fade back into the golden ballroom seconds before everything shatters. To understand the storm brewing inside Samantha's life, you have to see where she came from. Two worlds so different they could barely speak the same language. Her father, Richard Williams, was the embodiment of polished success. A senior investment banker, his life revolved around stock tickers, exclusive clubs, and the unspoken hierarchy of who matters and who doesn't. Status wasn't just important to him, it was oxygen. Every detail from the cut of his suits to the neighborhood he lived in was calculated to signal power. Her mother, Audrey, couldn't have been more different. A kindergarten teacher with a warm smile and hands always busy tying a shoelace, packing a lunch, patting a shoulder in comfort. She valued kindness over competition, honesty over image. Where Richard measured worth in titles and income, Audrey measured it in integrity and how you treated the people who couldn't give you anything in return. Growing up between them was like walking a tightrope between two realities. Weekdays with her mother were filled with home-cooked meals, small apartments, and stories before bed. Weekends with her father were a parade of fine dining, luxury cars, and conversations that felt like interviews, each question designed to measure her ambition against his expectations. From the start, Samantha learned that in one world, she was enough, exactly as she was, and in the other, she would never quite measure up. From the moment Samantha could hold a pencil, her father had already mapped out her life like a corporate business plan. Step 1. Attend an elite preparatory school where last names carried more weight than report cards. Step 2. Get into one of the Ivy League universities, Harvard or Princeton preferably, but he'd settle for Yale. Step 3. Earn a law degree or an MBA, then slide seamlessly into a lucrative position at one of his colleagues' firms. Richard spoke of this future as though it were not a choice, but a certainty. He'd drop comments at dinner, "When you're at Harvard," as if the decision had already been made. Samantha, polite and quiet, would simply nod, even though part of her already knew this wasn't her dream. The breaking point came the summer after she graduated high school. Sitting across from him in his glass-walled penthouse office, she spoke the words she'd been holding back for months. "Dad, I'm enlisting in the Army." The silence that followed was so sharp, it felt like the air itself had cracked. His expression shifted from confusion to disbelief and finally to something harsher, a look of wounded pride. "The Army?" he repeated, as though testing the word in his mouth. "Samantha, people from our background don't enlist. If you must serve, you become an officer. Or better yet, you serve your country from a boardroom where real decisions are made." To him, her choice wasn't just a deviation from the plan, it was a humiliation, a waste of potential, a step down from the pedestal he'd been building for her since birth. Samantha sat there feeling the weight of his disapproval pressing like a hand on her chest. But somewhere under that pressure, her resolve solidified. She wasn't turning back. After that conversation, something in their relationship broke, and neither of them knew how to fix it. Every meeting after that felt colder, sharper. Dinners at his penthouse became quiet, formal affairs, where the air was thick with unspoken judgment. He'd ask polite but pointed questions about her life, questions that weren't meant to learn, but to measure her against the invisible standard he still clung to. If she spoke about her training, he'd change the subject to a friend's son who had just been accepted to law school. If she mentioned a security assignment she was proud of, he'd counter with news about a colleague's daughter making partner at a top investment firm. The comparisons were never direct, but they were constant, drip by drip, like water wearing down stone. And then there was the sentence, the one that would echo in her head for years afterward. They had been standing in his study one winter evening, the city lights sprawling behind him through the glass. She'd just told him she was taking a full-time security position after her military service. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was calm, almost pitying, and that made it worse. People from our background don't work as security guards. He said it as if it were a law of nature, something as absolute as gravity. In that moment, Samantha realized he wasn't just disappointed in her career, he was ashamed of it. And that shame wasn't something she could reason away. From then on, a quiet distance settled between them. They still spoke, still met on holidays, but there was no real closeness, just the polite, measured conversation of two people living on opposite sides of a wall neither dared to tear down. It arrived on a Tuesday morning, buried under a stack of bills and grocery store flyers. A thick, cream-colored envelope sealed with gold foil. Samantha almost tossed it aside, thinking it was another piece of upscale junk mail. But then she saw the handwriting on the front formal, elegant, and unmistakably not her father's. Inside was a wedding invitation so ornate it could have doubled as a piece of artwork. Heavy cardstock, edges gilded, embossed lettering that shimmered faintly when tilted toward the light. In swirling script it read, "Richard Williams and Eleanor Harrington request the honor of your presence at their wedding celebration." Her father's name, side by side with another woman's wife. Number 3. Eleanor Harrington, the socialite whose name had been splashed across society pages for years. Samantha stared at the gold letters until they seemed to blur, a dull ache rising in her chest. Her first instinct was to crumple the invitation right there at the kitchen counter. She could already picture the event, a ballroom full of people her father's age and status, the careful choreography of small talk, the subtle glances measuring her against an invisible checklist she would never pass. Her phone buzzed on the counter. Alicia, her oldest friend. Samantha hesitated, then answered. Within minutes, Alicia had the whole story. "Don't you dare throw that away," Alicia said firmly. "If you don't go, you're letting him win. Show up. Look incredible. Hold your head high. Let him see exactly who you are now." Samantha let out a dry laugh. "Who I am doesn't matter to him." "Then make it matter to you," Alicia replied without missing a beat. "Go for you, not for him." Samantha looked down at the invitation again, running her thumb over the raised gold lettering. It felt heavier now, not just in weight, but in meaning. The Saturday before the wedding, Samantha found herself standing under the harsh white lights of a boutique fitting room, surrounded by mirrors that seemed to multiply her uncertainty. Racks of dresses in every shade and fabric lined the walls, sleek silks, shimmering satins, delicate chiffons. She hated shopping for events like this. It always felt like preparing for a performance she'd never asked to be in. Alicia was already flipping through hangers like a woman on a mission. No black. Too funeral. And no red. You'll look like you're trying to upstage the bride, Samantha smirked. God forbid. After nearly an hour of trial and error, too tight, too bright, too plain, they found it. A navy blue gown, simple but elegant, the kind of dress that didn't shout for attention but earned it quietly. When Samantha stepped into it, the fabric draped perfectly over her frame, the deep color bringing out the steel in her eyes. She turned toward the mirror. For a moment, she didn't see the security guard her father always introduced. She saw the woman who had led high-profile protection details, the soldier who had stood watch in places most people would never dare to go. That evening, she stopped by her mother's apartment. Audrey, ever the gentle presence, looked her over with a smile that was warm but tinged with something protective. "You look beautiful," her mother said. "But remember," she placed a hand on Samantha's arm, "you don't need to prove anything to anyone but yourself." Samantha nodded, letting the words settle in. In her father's world, she might always be measured against a yardstick she never agreed to. But in her own, she was already enough. The night before the wedding, Samantha lay in bed staring at the ceiling, the room dim except for the soft orange glow of the street lamp outside. Her dress hung neatly on the back of the door, her overnight bag packed and ready by the foot of the bed. Everything was in place except her resolve. The doubts crept in like whispers she couldn't silence. She could see it already, her father's polite smile, the subtle curl of his lip as he introduced her to yet another guest with that same line, "She's just a security guard." The sting of it repeated over and over until it was all she could hear. On the nightstand, her train ticket to the resort lay under her phone. She reached for it, the stiff paper bending slightly between her fingers. Her grip tightened until her knuckles whitened. She could still back out, stay home, let the whole thing pass without putting herself in the line of his judgment again. Her phone buzzed. Alicia. Just a single message. "Remember, this is about you, not him." Samantha closed her eyes, took a slow breath, and set the ticket back down. The weight in her chest didn't disappear, but somewhere under it, a thin strand of resolve began to hold. The taxi slowed as it rounded the final curve, revealing the Rosewood Resort in full view, a stretch of manicured gardens and gleaming white buildings that looked more like a palace than a hotel. A fountain arched streams of water high into the air, catching the sunlight like liquid diamonds. Bellhops in crisp uniforms rushed to unload luggage from sleek black sedans. Samantha stepped out of the cab, the warm coastal breeze brushing against her navy dress. Everywhere she looked, there were people who belonged to her father's world, men in tailored linen suits discussing investment portfolios, women in pastel designer dresses balancing champagne flutes as if they were born with them in hand. Every smile seemed rehearsed, every laugh perfectly modulated. She adjusted the strap of her overnight bag, straightening her shoulders before heading toward the grand entrance. That's when she saw them, her father and Eleanor standing near the lobby's marble staircase, like the royal couple in a magazine spread. He in a perfectly cut suit, she in a flowing cream dress, both radiating an effortless elegance that felt carefully constructed. "You made it," her father said, his tone polite but without warmth. He leaned in for a quick cheek kiss, so brief it barely made contact. Eleanor's smile was just as practiced. "So glad you could join us," she said lightly, her gaze already sliding past Samantha to greet another guest. "The rehearsal dinner is at 6. Do make yourself comfortable until then." And just like that, they moved on, leaving Samantha standing in the middle of the bustling lobby, surrounded by strangers who didn't know her name, and likely wouldn't care if they did. The private dining room overlooked the ocean, its glass walls framing a sunset so perfect it could have been painted. Round tables draped in white linen filled the space, each crowned with towering arrangements of orchids and roses. A string quartet played softly in the corner, the notes delicate enough to disappear under the low murmur of conversation. Samantha found her place card at a table near the edge of the room, far from the head table, where her father and Eleanor would sit. She'd barely taken a sip of wine when she heard his voice behind her. "This is my daughter Samantha," he announced to an older couple in tailored evening wear. "She's a security guard." Just like that, no mention of her military service, no acknowledgement of her position at a top security firm, just a job title stripped of all context, dropped into the conversation like it was something to be politely endured. The woman gave a thin smile, her eyes flicking over Samantha's dress as if searching for something to praise. The man tried to salvage the moment. "Richard tells us you were in the army," but the conversation fizzled almost instantly. As her father led them away, Samantha caught it a whisper sharp enough to cut. With his connections, she could have done anything. It didn't happen just once. Over the next hour, the same scene repeated like a bad loop. Each introduction delivered with that faint shrug in his voice, each guest reacting with a mix of polite disinterest and subtle surprise that this was his daughter. And each time Samantha felt the sting, but she kept her back straight, her smile even. Only the eyes gave her away. By the time the main course was served, Samantha could feel her composure wearing thin. The constant introductions, the polite nods, the subtle glances that slid over her as if she were a curiosity rather than a guest, it was all grinding her down like sandpaper. She slipped away from the table, weaving between servers carrying trays of champagne, and stepped into a quiet hallway outside the dining room. The muffled laughter and clinking glasses on the other side of the door felt like they belonged to another world entirely. Pulling out her phone, she typed quickly to Alicia, "Mistake coming here." The reply came almost instantly, as if Alicia had been waiting for it. "Remember why you're proud of what you do." Samantha stared at the screen. The words were simple, but they landed heavy. Proud. She thought of the lives she'd protected, the threats she'd neutralized, the long nights on watch when others slept soundly because she was there. She took a slow breath, tucking the phone back into her clutch. The sting of the evening was still there, but Alicia's reminder was like a hand on her shoulder, steadying her, holding her upright. The next afternoon, the garden behind the Rosewood Resort was transformed into something out of a luxury bridal magazine. Rows of white chairs faced an elaborate floral arch, its roses and lilies glowing softly under the late afternoon sun. The ocean breeze carried the mingled scents of salt and perfume, and somewhere a string ensemble played a slow, elegant prelude. Samantha arrived early enough to find a seat in the very back row, exactly where she wanted to be. From here, she could see everything without being in the middle of it. She set her small clutch on her lap, her posture relaxed enough to blend in, but alert enough to notice the little details most people missed. She didn't need to hear her father's voice introducing her again. She didn't need to be drawn into polite conversations about people she didn't know and lives she didn't envy. Back here, she was just another guest in a dark dress, and that was fine with her. From her vantage point, she watched as guests began filling the rows, men in summer weight suits, women in flowing dresses, diamonds catching the light. Laughter floated in the air, but she kept her focus forward, quietly taking in the scene, unaware that before the day was over, she'd be moving from the last row to the very center of everyone's attention. From her seat in the last row, Samantha's eyes naturally scanned the crowd, not just the guests, but the staff. Years of military discipline had wired her brain to notice what didn't belong, and something here didn't belong. One waiter passed by carrying a tray of champagne flutes, his crisp white shirt clearly a size too big, sleeves awkwardly rolled. The jacket hung off his shoulders like it had been borrowed, his polished shoes scuffed on the sides like they'd been worn for running, not walking on marble floors. Another lingered too long near the entryway, his eyes flicking across the crowd, not in the casual way a server might glance at guests, but like someone mapping out a room, identifying patterns, identifying targets. Samantha's stomach tightened. It wasn't just one thing. It was the layering of little red flags, stacking one on top of another until they formed a silent alarm in her head. The smiles on their faces didn't match the tension in their posture. The way they moved lacked the easy flow of seasoned staff. And most telling of all, their attention wasn't on trays or plates. It was on the jewelry, the handbags, the high-priced watches glittering on wrists. Somewhere deep inside the part of her trained to respond to threats whispered, "This is going to go bad." Samantha pretended to adjust the strap of her clutch as she stepped toward the service hallway, slipping into the narrow space where the noise of the ballroom dulled. Two voices, low, hurried, and careless, bled through the cracked door of a storage room. $2 million in jewelry, easy. The other 4 are on their way, 15 minutes. Her pulse sharpened. This wasn't just suspicion anymore. This was confirmation. She angled her body, letting the shadows swallow her as she eased out her phone. A quick message to the resort's head of security. Possible armed crew. 4 more inbound. Secure exits. Then, without hesitation, she dialed 911. Her voice stayed low but firm, the same tone she'd used in military comms. Ballroom at Silvercrest Resort. Active robbery in planning. Armed suspects on site. Send units now. She hung up, slid the phone back into her clutch, and exhaled slowly. The countdown had already started. The sharp crack of a gunshot tore through the music, shattering the elegant hum of conversation. Crystal glasses toppled, the band's melody screeched to a halt, and the ballroom erupted into screams. From across the room, Samantha's gaze snapped to the center of the chaos. Her father, frozen, a gun barrel pressed hard against his temple. The masked man holding him barked orders, his voice slicing through the panic. "Nobody moves! Jewelry and cash now!" Around them, guests clutched their pearls, ducked under tables, or stood rooted in shock. Samantha's mind raced, not with fear, but with calculation. Every second lost meant the noose tightening around the crowd, and her father's life hanging in the balance. Samantha dropped her clutch to the floor and darted toward an elderly woman clutching her chest, her face pale and trembling. "It's okay, ma'am. I'm a medic," she said, her voice steady but loud enough for nearby guests and the robbers to hear. Kneeling beside the woman, Samantha kept one hand gently on her shoulder while her eyes scanned the room in fragments, doorways, exits, weapon positions, the twitch of the man's trigger finger on her father's temple. The woman's breathing slowed just enough for Samantha to lean in and murmur, her lips barely moving, "Help is here. Stay down." Across the room, 2 resort security guards caught her eye. She gave a quick, precise hand signal, military style, unmistakable. 3 suspects visible. Wait for my mark. From anyone else, it might have looked like a random gesture, but for those trained to see, it was the green light preparing to ignite chaos in her favor. The moment came in a blink. The gunman's attention wavered just enough. Samantha surged forward like a coiled spring snapping loose. Her hand clamped over his wrist, twisting hard until the gun jerked free. In the same motion, she drove her shoulder into his chest, spinning him around so his body shielded hers. Gasps ripped through the crowd. "Drop it," she barked, pressing the muzzle against his ribs. The other robbers froze just for a heartbeat. Then one fired. The shot tore across her forearm, hot pain lancing up to her shoulder. She didn't falter. The ringleader's body took the next bullet meant for her. From the corner of her eye, Samantha saw another masked man shoving a terrified teenage girl toward the kitchen. Without thinking, she shoved the ringleader into a table and bolted, blood streaking down her arm. The chase was on, adrenaline drowning the pain. There would be no hostages. Not tonight. The kitchen door slammed open as Samantha burst through. The kidnapper spun, yanking the terrified girl closer, the blade glinting under harsh fluorescent light. "Let her go," Samantha said, her voice low, steady, every muscle ready to strike. His eyes flicked toward the noise in the hallway. That split second was all she needed. She lunged, knocking the knife from his grip, shoving him hard against the counter. The girl stumbled free into waiting arms. Seconds later, resort security swarmed in, snapping cuffs onto his wrists. By the time the police arrived, the remaining robbers were pinned to the floor, the stolen jewels recovered. Samantha finally let herself exhale. Blood trickled from her arm, staining the satin of her gown. She stepped back into the ballroom, where the chaos had given way to silence. Then, slowly, a wave of applause rose, echoing off the high ceilings. Every clap, every cheer, every tear-filled gaze seemed to acknowledge not just the woman in the ruined gown, but the hero they had finally seen. By the next morning, Samantha's face was everywhere. Clips of her disarming the gunman, shielding guests, and storming the kitchen played on national television, looped over dramatic headlines. Wedding Day Hero, ex-military woman foils $2 million heist. Talk shows debated her courage. Social media exploded with hashtags bearing her name. Strangers wrote messages of thanks, veterans praised her composure under fire, and security experts called her a textbook example of professionalism under chaos. For once, the world didn't see just a security guard. They saw Samantha, the woman who stared down armed criminals and saved lives without hesitation. The crystal champagne flute slipped from her father's hand, shattering against the marble floor. On the TV, the replay froze at the moment Samantha grabbed the gunman's wrist, her own arm bleeding while shoving him away from her father. For a long time, he didn't speak. His eyes stayed fixed on the screen, as if afraid that looking away might make the truth disappear. Finally, he turned to her, his voice unsteady. I was wrong, Samantha. About you, about everything." She didn't rush to fill the silence. She let it hang, the weight of years pressing between them. "I'm proud of you," he added, almost like it hurt to say it, yet also like he'd been waiting his whole life to mean it. In the weeks that followed, the air between Samantha and her father softened. He called more often, asked about her work without the usual condescension, even introduced her properly as my daughter, the security specialist. But Samantha knew the truth. Her worth had never depended on him. Not on his approval, not on his applause, and certainly not on the title he chose to give her. She had earned her place in the world long before the cameras rolled, long before that wedding day. And now she carried a quiet certainty, one no insult could shake. Lesson: don't let someone else's definition of you become your reality. Live your truth, and in time, the world will see you for who you really are. Your value isn't defined by someone else's opinion, status, or approval. It's defined by the courage you show, the choices you make, and the integrity you live by, especially when no one's watching. Stand firm in your truth, and sooner or later, the world will have no choice but to see it. If Samantha's story inspired you, don't just move on. Join our community. Click subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another powerful story of courage, redemption, and self-worth. Your next life-changing perspective might be in the very next video.